Have you ever heard of the second sight? Well, second sight is said to be a rare ability, enjoyed by few, which allows them to know without being told what will happen in the future or what is happening in a different place at that time. The term second sight originated in the highlands and refers to a person having two sights. The first referring to normal vision and the second to having premonitions of the future, or generally seeing things which others cannot see. And these are said to take the form of visions. On the subject of second sight, Martin from the Isle of Skye described these visions in his book Western Isles of Scotland in 1703. He said, "The vision makes such a lovely impression upon the seers that they neither see nor think of anything else except the vision, as long as it continues, and then they appear pensive or jovial, according to the object which was represented to them." It is said and long believed that people who have spent an extended period of time in the company of the good people and then return to live once again among mortals are blessed or cursed, depending on your point of view, with second sight. Sick persons are often said to be with the fairies, and when cured to have come back. A woman who died here about 30 years ago was commonly believed to have been with the fairies during her 7 years of sickness when she was a maiden. She married after coming back and had children, and she was always able to see the good people and to talk with them, for she had the second sight, and it is said that she used to travel with the fairies at night. After her marriage, she lived in Tuam, and though her people were 6 or 7 miles out from Tuam in the country, she could always tell all that was taking place with them there, and she at her own home at the time. So what do you think? Would you like to possess this particular skill? There's no doubt there would be times that it would come in handy. You might know when a friend or an in-law is on their way for a drop-in visit, give you time to sweep the floor or check the bathroom is decent or just to get the kettle on. But all in all, I can't imagine that having second sight would sit easy, particularly the ability to see, hear and interact with the good people. Sure, it might be great if you have a friendly brownie around the place or a lovely Leanne she is passing through town, but there are so many others who might make their presence known to you in loud, distracting and downright unpleasant ways. It could drive you insane, or it could inspire a person to great things. Now, there once was a Scotsman by the name of Reverend Rev Kirk, who was said to enjoy second sight. Kirk was born in Aberfoyle, Scotland, and was the 7th born son, which is of great interest, of course, as I mentioned, because many believe that the 7th son or daughter of a 7th son or daughter is particularly gifted with second sight and peculiar with the mysterious gifts of healing. Now, I couldn't find evidence that Kirk's mother or father were themselves the 7th born, but nevertheless, it was well accepted that Kirk enjoyed the gift of second sight, which in his particular case allowed him to see the good people. Kirk was born in the year 1644. His father was minister of Aberfoyle, and after studying theology and helping to produce the first publication of the Bible into Scottish Gaelic, Kirk took over from his father as minister of Aberfoyle in the year 1685. Now, Kirk was an unusual man for his time, or you could even say for any time, Perhaps because of his possessing second sight, he took a passionate interest in things supernatural, fairies, as well as the folklore and beliefs of his parishioners in the Scottish Highlands. He grew so passionate, so consumed with understanding his second sight and the fairy that he could see and hear, that in 1691, just 1 year before his untimely death, he set about collecting and writing about his and other people's experiences and his understanding of them. Well, Reverend Robert Kirk concluded that the good people lived in caverns under Doon Hill, which is close to the village of Aberfoyle. Also, that located on Doon Hill was the gateway to the home of the fairies, a place which he described as the secret commonwealth, and it was said that the fairy folk could be seen on the first Sunday of every quarter year by those with the gift of second sight. Robert Kirk took regular walks to Doon Hill, and he is known to have spent much time lying on the hill with his ear to the ground, listening for the sound of fairy activity. One evening, on the 14th of May, 1692, his body was found lying, seemingly dead, on the hill, and as it happened, he did die very shortly after. Local stories tell of him having fallen into an unconscious state and that the fairies of Doon Hill had carried off his soul. They were said to have been very angry with him for his over-attentive interest in their activities and their secret domain. It's curious, isn't it? Well, a funeral took place and a tomb was erected on the south side of Kirkton Church graveyard. There is a large pine tree that remains standing at the top of Doon Hill, which some believe contains Robert Kirk's imprisoned spirit. But that is not where his strange tale ends. Well, there is a brilliant account of what happened next in Evans Wentz's book. I'd like to share that with you. He writes, "My first hunt for fairies in Scotland began at Aberfoyle, where the highlands and the lowlands meet, and in the very place where Robert Kirk, the minister of Aberfoyle, was taken by them in the year 1692. The minister spent a large part of his time studying the ways of the good people, and he must have been able to see them, for he was a seventh son. Mrs. J. McGregor, who keeps the key to the old churchyard where there is a tomb to Kirk, though many say there is nothing in it but a coffin filled with stones, told me that Kirk was taken into the fairy knoll, which she pointed to just across a little valley in front of us, and is there yet, for the hill is full of caverns, and in them the good people have their homes. After having visited Kirk's tomb, I called on the Reverend William Taylor, the present successor of Kirk, and as we sat together in the very room where Kirk must have written his secret commonwealth, he told me that tradition reports Kirk as having been taken by the fairies while he was walking on their hill, which is but a short way from the parsonage. At the time of his disappearance, people said he was taken because the fairies were displeased with him for prying into their secrets. At all events, it seems likely that Kirk was taken ill very suddenly with something like apoplexy while on the fairy knoll and died there. I have searched the presbytery books and find no record of how Kirk's death really took place. But, of course, there is not the least doubt of his body being in the grave. So thus, according to Mr. Taylor, we are to conclude that if the fairies carried off anything, it must have been the spirit or the soul of Kirk. I talked with others around Aberfoyle about Kirk, and some would have it that his body and soul were both taken, and that what was buried was no corpse at all. Mrs. Margaret McGregor, one of the few Gaelic speakers of the old school left in Aberfoyle, holds another opinion, for she said to me, "Nothing could be surer than that the good people took Kirk's spirit only." I wonder if possessing second sight was a blessing and a curse for Kirk. He described it himself as a rapture, transport, and sort of death. From his unique position as Reverend, he produced a valuable written account of fairy faith in the Highlands, which is still read in the 21st century. But I wonder at what cost. It seems Kirk was drawn to Doon Hill, walking there daily, sleeping on the side of the hill, laying on the ground with his ear pushed hard on the grass and single-mindedly listening for to hear the good people within. I wonder to what extent this fascination affected his relationships, his health, and maybe even his career. Well, one thing we know for certain is that Kirk's life was surely extraordinary. For me, there are two things which I find particularly fascinating. The first is his relationship with the good people. Let's assume he did have the second sight. He could hear and see the good people. Well, I'm heartened to think that he was fascinated by them. He wasn't horrified or repulsed by them. He didn't hide away from them in terror, but he sought them out. He wanted to get to know them, to understand them. This is encouraging. And of course, if it is, as many believe, that the good people took him away to dwell with them, is this really because they were angry with him for prying into their secrets? Is it possible that they were so displeased with him for revealing too much about them that they removed him from his life among mortals? Did they kill him, or does he dwell to this day among the good people? Will he return one day? And if he does, I wonder if anyone would believe his tale anyway. Well, it does raise many questions. And here's another thing to consider if you think you would like having second sight. There is a real possibility that the good people keep a particularly close eye on mortals with second sight. I'm not sure I'd want to live under that kind of scrutiny. For if you said or did something to displease them, who knows what might happen? So do you believe that Kirk is buried in the churchyard at Aberfoyle? Or as some others believe, that his coffin is filled with nothing but rocks? Did the good people take his body and spirit to dwell with them within Doon Hill, or did they leave his body and take only the spirit? This mystery remains to this very day. Visitors still climb Doon Hill and write their wishes on pieces of white silk or cloth and tying them to the branches of the trees in the hope that the good people will grant them. This tree is often referred to as the minister's pine tree. Well, we've only scratched the surface, but I hope you have enjoyed our wee look at the curious life of Reverend Robert Kirk. And if you want more true fairy encounters to brighten up your day, take a look at the video on screen now. I think you'll enjoy it. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!